because the NFL game was so bad. It was classic Thursday night football with Titans and Jags. They went old school on us last night, John. They gave us the old 4 out of 5 years, Titans, Jags, Thursday night. They got lazy on us.
Yeah, I mean, the Jags are, I think, if we want to talk about the poster child for Thursday night football, it's the Jacksonville Jaguars. Last year was sort of the outlier when they were a good football team, and now they're back to being the Jags, and they just gave up. They didn't even show up for that game. Wouldn't tackle Derrick Henry. Yeah, that was bad football. But, you know, buried in it was the worst part of all, and that's Mike Pereira saying, hey, the NFL wants the officials to call more holding penalties. I don't know if you caught that.
No, I wasn't watching that intently.
Yeah, well, nobody was. I know, but that made me cringe.
This is to give you an indication of how intently I was watching. I had the Titans defense and the kicker for fantasy, so I was just paying attention to kicks and defense.
Well, yeah, it's that time of year. I was telling Josh off the air. Bad teams tend to give up, and that's what happened with Jacksonville. I mean, they didn't feel like tackling anybody.
No,
because they said, "What's the point?"
What was worse, the flop from Ramsey or a soccer flop?
Hey, whatever you like best. I mean, it was that's the kind of performance that gets a coach fired, because it's pretty clear the team has checked out, and that's obviously. I mean, that's your lone goal, and that makes it really difficult for coaches in this league because it is a very emotional game. And when, you know, because of that, when it becomes clear you don't have a chance to go to the playoffs, guys give up because it's kind of a grind.
Mm-hmm. We got a lot to dive into in this game. A lot of NFL last night, by the way. Titans win that game, so that puts them in a nice position. That AFC wildcard race, really going to be a good one. The NFC wildcard race, I don't know, about what? How many, what do you got? Minnesota, Seattle, Carolina, and I guess to some extent Philly and Dallas. And Washington is still 6-6. They're there, but no one really believes in them. The loser, if Philly wins, they're in first. Dallas would be the wild card team, I guess, if Philly wins. So there's like, what, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's about 5 teams for 2 spots in the NFC.
Yeah, a lot. Obviously depends on what happens elsewhere with Minnesota and Seattle's playing each other on Monday night. Carolina obviously in the mix. I think you're right, though. Everybody thinks Washington's done, not from a record standpoint, but just from the fact that Mark Sanchez is the starting quarterback. So that's the reality there. And we talked about the probabilities a lot. This is it. This is it for the Eagles. I mean, they're 26% as we speak right now. If they win the game, it goes to 56%. So that means more likely than not they make the postseason. If they lose, it goes down to 6%, or I think it's 5 or 6%. So it's virtually nil if they lose this game. This is ostensibly, this is it. Win and you're in it. Lose and you probably don't have a chance to be, if you want to be realistic about it. So that's how big this game is.
All right, let's look at the particulars of what we know, John, for the injury report, which just came out about an hour ago. Jordan Hicks is out. Jalen Mills. I thought the Jalen Mills story was interesting, though, because not only is he out, Peterson said that, hey, he's still a ways away.
Yeah, something's going on there, because obviously he showed up with a walking boot, which he had not had on before. So that indicates to me a couple of things. Either it was more serious than the Eagles thought, perhaps, but he's not as close as once thought, and it's pretty clear that might be an issue even moving forward. I think the positive is they listed Avonte Maddox as questionable, even though he hasn't practiced at all. So he seems to be a lot closer. And then Jordan Hicks, I think part of it, you know, if you think about Jordan Hicks last year, and remember he was playing through an injury before he tore his Achilles, and he kind of said that he thought it was related to him favoring and tearing the Achilles. So I think he wants to be, if you think about his contract situation, and he's a free agent, the last thing he wants to do is get another serious injury on top of it. So I think he's being very cautious, and I can't really say I blame him.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see because with Hicks out, Mills out, both those guys, I believe, missed the game the first time these two teams played. You had Camus, who had the interception dropped in that first game. We know he's made some news this week. But that secondary, we touched on this a little yesterday, that secondary is at least in much better position now than they were the first time these two teams played.
Yeah, and we know it got really bad in New Orleans with all the injuries, and then even worse in the game, which will go down in infamy with Chandon Sullivan and Devontae Ballsby and Cravon LeBlanc. At least now you have Sidney Jones, you have Rasul Douglas. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but they're at least have some more playing time under their belt. They're legitimate NFL players. Sidney's a second-round pick. Rasul's a third-round pick. So that's very helpful. And Corey Graham's back. A lot of people, forgot Corey Graham was out as well with the hamstring. So that's a veteran guy. That helps. And Avonte Maddox is getting closer and closer. You'd prefer to have Jalen Mills and Ronald Darby and Rodney McLeod, but
right.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah, that McLeod injury goes back a ways, but people really have really forgotten how much he brings to the table or brought to the table.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what you should do. I mean, he got injured early. There's nothing you can do about it. Season-ending injury. Same with Darby, and you got to move on. But these were impactful players on this defense and starting players, and it's been difficult to replace them, but it is getting more incrementally better from week to week. And now that you have guys back and starting to gain a little bit more confidence with more playing time, Rasul Douglas and Sidney Jones, it's getting better. It's certainly not a strength. I would never claim that. It's not a strength of the team right now, but it is a lot better than where it was when we hit rock bottom, and that would be that New Orleans game.
Yeah. You mentioned a strength. The line has been a strength, particularly Lane Johnson. We know when he plays and he's healthy, they're usually pretty good. He had been hurt. He had the knee issue. Is the play the last couple of weeks a good sign that maybe he's coming around, and when he comes around, so does the team?
Yeah, I wrote about that today on 973ESPN.com. If you think about Lane since Doug has been here, he's been sort of the guy. When he plays and he's playing well, the Eagles generally win the game. It's hard to, I think as a whole, fans especially put too much on the quarterback and think it's about quarterback versus quarterback all the time. So it's hard to say a right tackle is the reason you win and this is the reason you lose.
They do a lot around him, though.
You go back to the PED suspension. I mean, they're 5-1 with him. They're 2-8 without him. And then last year he stays relatively. He plays almost the entire season.
Yeah.
He missed the one game with the concussion, and obviously the Eagles are 16-3 and win the Super Bowl. And then this year he struggled with injuries, and he struggled with injuries that guys typically would miss games. A high ankle sprain, that's usually a 2 to 4 week injury. Lane played right through it. MCL sprain is usually a 4-week injury. He missed one game. That was the Cowboys game, and he's played through it. And now he's getting healthier, he's getting better, and I think that's one of the major reasons why the Eagles have looked better on the offensive line, have finally won the 2 consecutive games, and now they'll have the best right tackle in football to match up with obviously one of the Cowboys' best players in DeMarcus Lawrence, and that's a big advantage because he wasn't there the first time these two played.
And just to go back over that injury report, we've got Hicks and Mills out, Bennett, Jernigan, Maddox questionable. I don't see Peters on the status report. I do see him on the practice report, not injury related. So it sounds like he's over that injury and will play on Sunday, and obviously having him is big.
Yeah, Doug said he's going to play. He hasn't practiced all week. He's dealing with that personal problem, which really goes back to last week as well, where he missed 2 practices. So, in some ways, a guy that age, sort of a load management thing, it helps to give him a respite from practice. I'm not sure you want to go a week without practicing, but the Eagles want him on the field. He'll be on the field. And Doug, even though he's questionable, Doug also said that Michael Bennett's going to play. So I think you could put him in the category of playing unless something drastic happens and he suffers a setback. Whereas a guy like Maddox, who hasn't practiced and was listed as questionable, I would lean him more towards the column of not playing.
Jernigan?
Jernigan, that's the one truly iffy. We don't know with Jernigan and the fact that the back spasms and Doug even said today, he's not a doctor. He doesn't know if it's related to the cervical fusion surgery because maybe he's we just talked about that with Jordan Hicks. Maybe he's favoring something and that creates the back spasms. So that is the one that truly is probably 50-50.
Maybe him and Foles can have a talk.
And
Fultz,
it'll
sorry.
come down to well, I think Tim had surgery. Tim had cervical fusion surgery. He doesn't have a syndrome. So, I don't want to put those two in the same category. Nothing against Markel.
No.
It's a real thing.
No, I'm one of the few.
It's not cervical fusion.
I'm one of the few that thinks this is probably a good thing for him. But I digress. I'm probably in the minority there. Let's get this. I want to talk a little bit about last week. We saw Clement in the screen game. You talk about Lane Johnson and the offensive line and how important that is. But I think it'll be interesting this week because those 2 linebackers, and we talked to Archer. You talked to him last night. I had him on 3:30 today. Those 2 linebackers, Lee's not going to play, but so that means those 2 guys are going to play. Is the screen game a way to go against this defense?
Yeah, Jeff, I think you could look at it both ways. Jeff Mosher was saying you want to do that against a team with the linebackers, but I think it, depends on aggressiveness and how aggressive are the Cowboys going to be. Then you can hit them with the screen. And now if you want to look at the other way, these guys are athletic and smart enough to where if you have things set up correctly and guys hit their landmarks, the offensive linemen, they're so good they can get around that and blow it up, whereas other teams probably couldn't. So you kind of look at it both ways, and it probably comes down to do the Eagles have it called at the right particular time, maybe on a blitz or something of that nature, because as I said, these linebackers are probably these right now, as we're talking today, this is the best 2 linebackers in football, any team in the NFL. That's how they're playing, Jalen Smith and Leighton Vander Esch. So in theory, it would be more difficult to run the screen game than typically against a team that obviously doesn't have good linebackers. So right. I would lean in that category. And look, I don't think it's ever a good strategy to say we're going to attack the best part of a team. Think about it from
it's the old John. You got to run right at Reggie White. You got to run right at Dexter
exactly.
Manley.
That's what I was going to bring up. People say that, but teams do not game plan by saying we're going to go at Reggie White. They don't game plan saying, you know what, we're going to take advantage of the aggressiveness of Lawrence Taylor. They do the exact opposite. They say, look, this is one of the great players of all time. We got to go about this a different way. I think that's the more prudent strategy. I think people are, to be honest, are being, a bit pie in the sky if they're saying we're going to take advantage of the Cowboys' best players. I don't think that's a good strategy.
Yeah, I don't know people to outthink the room. I don't know that strategy.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. You're saying I'm the smartest guy in the room. Right. I can do what somebody else can do, and I don't think Doug's going to do that. I don't. Yeah. I think Doug's smart, and I think he realizes what the strengths of the Cowboys are, and he will go in different directions. I think that's what good coaches do.
Do you feel like, not that Wentz was playing poorly, but more that he has taken another step?
I don't think he's playing poorly. I think he's left a lot of stuff on the field. We talked about that on the show last night as well. There were 3 particular plays, and everybody brings up the red zone play, the interception. I think that was a bad route as well. But there were also 2 glaring plays. There was that crossing pattern to Nelson Aguilar that probably would have went for 30 or 40 yards that he just threw it into the ground. And then there was a screen to Dallas Goedert. He just missed him. That probably would have went for 35 yards. So he's leaving some stuff on the field. And what was an emphatic win and probably could have been a 40-13 game and would have looked even more impressive if he didn't leave those things on the field. So I've been saying all year, there have been some decision-making issues, and I think he's still a young quarterback. People forget that. And that's the part of his game I think that needs to improve the most. And as he gets, the one thing the Eagles, I mentioned this on the show last night as well, the one thing the Eagles have taken out of the offense because of the injury is the sneak and 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, where they were lights out on that last year. They've taken it out of the offense, and the only reason they would do that is protect them. So as we get farther off the injury, I think that will be back into the equation. And then the decision-making part, I think that's experience, and I think he'll continue to get better at that as well.
Yeah. And I don't know. Not like I likened it before to a guy going to a fast food joint and asking for a diet soda. You're trying to be conscious by drinking the diet drink, but you're not ready to make the full commitment to everything. I feel like the Eagles have just lacked.
I've been there.
The Eagles have lacked consistency. Like, I see some things. You're getting the diet drink, but you're not ready to cut out that burger just yet. And I see them doing some things. I don't see it all getting put together yet, but it might be building in that direction.
It could be. The offensive line is getting healthier. They're getting better. I've talked all year. I laughed at people, and Mike, who said this was a bad offensive line. I said, not when you compare it to the rest of the league. Mm-hmm. Now, when you compare it to last year and the success, maybe they weren't playing up to that level. They're starting to get back to that level, to being a top 5 offensive line. Carson's getting healthier and healthier. They figured out a way how to get Golden Tate involved. Who knows if they stay relevant this week and win the football game. Maybe Mike Wallace is back and you have that one thing that's missing, the ability to stretch the football field. And maybe things take off. But I think you're right. The consistency hasn't been there. And I think they're getting closer and closer and closer. And they have one game to stay relevant, and that's sort of where they are.
They got to win this one.
Got to win this one. And then it's no guarantee of anything because you have the really difficult schedule down the stretch. The only thing it guarantees is relevance. If you don't win this game, you're probably irrelevant, to be honest.
Yeah, if they lose this game, I have Zippo interest, I think, in the rest of the way.
Well, then we start talking about the draft and all that kind of good stuff. Who's going to re-sign?
Last week, John, before the Redskins game, we asked a question, and, of course, we got somewhat criticized for it. But look, we know the way fans think. That's the problem. Like, we understand the way fans think. They are, in today's day and age, whether you like it or not, fans are accepting of once they get to a point of the season where they don't believe anymore, they'd rather lose. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is sort of a new breed of fan. A lot of that is Sixer-centric.
Yes.
I think that is,
but it's now infiltrated. It's infiltrated into other sports where if you're a Giant fan, I'd rather just lose out. If you're a Jet fan, why am I winning? I'd rather just lose. So when your team gets to that point of the season where you no longer believe there's relevancy in your team's opportunity to win a championship, the alternative is, do I want to be 7-9 or would I rather just be 5-11? And most fan bases say, I'd rather be 5-11. So we asked before the Redskins game, are you almost secretly hoping they lose to the Redskins so that you go down that road? And, most of the people, I think it was about 82% said they wanted the Eagles to beat the Redskins, which means people still think there's some potential for this team, I guess.
Yeah, and I think they should. Because I do think this is a landscape that potentially, if they get hot at the right time, it could be, Aaron Rodgers. The 1 year he won the Super Bowl, that was a 10-6 year. That wasn't when they were 15-1. We talk about Eli Manning and the Giants getting hot. As not really a very good football team, but getting hot at the right time. I think when you add in the mix that the great teams, and I put great in air quotes, the Rams and the Saints, I think there's holes. I think they are beatable on a particular Sunday. And especially if you look at the Rams, who are clearly, to most, is the best team, they don't have a home field advantage. So I think that helps if you have to go on the road in the playoffs. So all of that can enter in the conversation, but only if the Eagles get there. And to get there, they got to beat the Cowboys. That's the first step. If they don't beat the Cowboys, they're not going to have that kind of opportunity.
McMullen's pick right now on the Sports Bash, and Eagles, don't forget, the countdown to kickoff for Eagles-Cowboys, 1 o'clock this Sunday on 97.3 ESPN. Krause and the crew. McMullen will have his insight on game day. It starts at 1. Your pick today is?
Pick today is the Eagles stay relevant for one more week. They keep going 24-21.
24-21. Wow. Sal Powell, 24-20. Johnny Mack, 24-21. Sal Powell said they're going to win this game and run the table.
They're not going to run the table. They're not going to beat the Rams in L.A., but I do think they can win every other game. So I do think they can get 3 out of 4.
All right. Good
and
vibes.
I'll get them in.
Good vibes all around the city, all around the Delaware Valley. All right, Johnny Mack is back with the countdown to kickoff this Sunday, 1 o'clock with Krause and the crew right here on 97.3 ESPN. Thanks, pal.
All right, thanks.
By the way, I'm not producing that show on Sunday, so I won't talk to you. And I'm on vacation next week, so I won't talk to you for a while.
What the hell? What am I going to do?
Okay, here's my question. By the time I get back, which is what, the 17th is my next show. The Eagles will be relevant?
Yeah, I just said I think they're going to win 3 or 4. Now, I haven't been great at picking games this year, so we'll probably be talking about the draft. But I have confidence. I think this team's got one more bullet left in the chamber. I think they're going to be relevant.
All right. I'll talk to you in a couple of weeks, pal.
All right, Mike. Enjoy it.
All right, man. John McMullen, August Beer, the Boardwalk Honda Hotline.